Well, welcome everyone, and welcome to our webinar on setting goals during a pandemic. Nothing can be more simpler and more fun than that, right? So I'm really pleased to be joined here with this great group of CVB professionals. We have Darren Green with Los Angeles, Rachel Benedict with Denver, and Doug Bennett with Louisville. And I thought that, as some of you may know the panelists, but not everybody may. And I thought that I would ask them the starting questions just to get us going for this morning. So here we are. We are, in fact, in this middle of this pandemic. And, we hear a lot about people just, they're hunkered down. So they're kind of setting new goals for themselves. Since it's the goals webinar, I thought it'd be goal related. So I'm curious from our panelists, what kind of personal goals that you're setting for yourself in the midst of this pandemic. So I'm going to start with you, Rachel. Have you set any goals?
So just so everyone knows, she did not give us this answer or this question in advance, because that's just how she rolls. So my goal, I would say, has been to just stay really active. Working out is a huge piece of what I do. So I've implemented this new fun thing where every time I take a bathroom break, I have to do like 10 push-ups, or I have to do bicep curls or something to kind of keep me active, so to speak. So that's kind of, and then I keep track because, I'm a little fastidious that way. So that's sort of what I've
OCD, I would say.
Yes, a little OCD.
Well, that's great, Rachel. Thank you for that. And that's a great idea. What about you, Doug?
Well, if some of my staff are listening in, they'll probably say, "You better say this," and I will. It's along the same lines, but I was determined not to catch that COVID extra 15 pounds, and I put myself on a program and have about halfway through it. I've had a couple ups and downs in terms of weight loss, but I'm at 45 pounds and counting, and feel great. And much like Rachel, it does take your mind a little bit off of the pressures of the day. That walk in the morning or that walk at night with some weightlifting proves to be very therapeutic these days. So onward and upward.
That's awesome. Well, gosh, so far we've gotten two sort of active fitness kinds of goals, but what about you, Darren?
Well, I've actually lost 15 pounds with no exercise at all. So I'm pretty proud. It's just.
Is that just stress related?
Yeah, but I think what's kept me busy is I took this opportunity to actually buy a house with a little bit more space, and I have room within my own compound. But what's good about being home is I can work on home projects every day instead of traveling all the time. So between decorating and furnishing and all the other stuff, it's actually been a great balance because there's a lot to do, but I've had the time to do it. So I've been trying to balance the work and the calls with getting settled.
Well, I can see it in the background there, Darren. So congratulations on your new home.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for being such good sports. And I also have on this call our team with To Synergize. We've got Suzanne Ravitz, our business analyst, and Terry Roberts, our program manager. And Terry's going to actually help field a little Q&A today. So if you have a question that pops up, please utilize your Q&A box. And she also wanted me to manage your expectations, as she always does. And we have, nearly 200 of you. And we have a very short period of time that we've allotted a couple of times through this webinar for Q&A. So if we can't get to all of your questions, please don't throw anything at us. And but Terry is going to be pulling from the questions that come in to sort of ask the panelists. So she'll be doing a great job of curating, as most of you know. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about goal setting. And, we're going to share some practices, so this might even provide you some confirmation to what you're doing, or it may send you into a panic. I'm not quite sure. But in any case, we're quite sure you're going to have at least one or two takeaways, really around the idea of goal setting, methods, and how people are changing that from the normal practice. And then we certainly will touch on sales incentives and where are we with our sales incentive programs. But first, before we get into all of that, I want to just share a few slides with you about what I call the "you're not alone" view of our industry's production. So I wanted to share a couple of slides with you. This is the weekly lead monitor. It's looking at about 250, maybe 257 CVB's data, and we're looking at this blue line of where we are with producing leads, the number of leads on a weekly basis. So you can see we started off the first quarter above where we've been in previous years. And then quickly, as you all know, our lead volume has now settled into this 800 lead area. And the other thing we're looking at here is when will we start to see our leads rise? And that's what we're paying very, very close attention to. In addition to, we look at this view, which is a % change week to week. And what we're looking for in this regard is some consistent positive numbers. So you could see that we've had some increases throughout and some positive variances. But what we're looking for is to see this consistently above the bar. So this is where we are with the volume of leads. But on the booking side of the world, we took a look at the data since April, so taking April through September 27th, which is the last date we pulled the data collectively. And as an aggregate with those 257 CVBs, we've confirmed 1.17 million room nights. And what you're looking at in this view is by booking window, meaning 40% of the rooms that are turning definite since April are being booked within 1 year of arrival. And when you look at other comparisons, there's that 40% that are being confirmed definite to arrive within the next 12 months. We are looking at these other 1 year out and 2 year out booking windows, which is where the majority of our activity is. And then I compare that with a slice of those CVBs that have convention centers greater than 250,000 gross square feet and kind of comparing their booking windows. So all of this is to say that you'll be getting copies of these slides, and I think it'd be interesting for you to take them and compare at least the pace to your own data as a measure to see how you're comparing to the industry. So I think that is just some things that we wanted to just share on the onset. But one of the distinctions that we'll make in this particular webinar is that there is a difference between year-end goals and sales production goals. And oftentimes, one gets mistaken for the other. So just as definition, year-end has also been called quite frequently in our industry as the consumption benchmark, the year-end goal. But basically, it's based on arrival date. So if it arrives January 1 to December 31st arrival dates, that would be considered the 2020 year-end number. Oftentimes, this number is used in PACE reports, but what I want to mention is that it's a main focus of our hotel partners. But as an industry, we speak predominantly in terms of sales production. In other words, what our salespeople or our sales team is going to book for future years. And these numbers are often tied to incentives. So it's what I'm going to confirm in this year, and it could land in this year or it could land in future years based on the data goes definite. So regardless of arrival. And it's usually commonly to track individual and team performance. And the sales production numbers are what we're going to predominantly talk about in this particular webinar. But there is, I want to just point out, a relationship between the two, meaning when we ran a number of studies years ago, I think the last time we ran it was 2015, tourism economics would compare our industries booked, or we call this year in, which is the dark blue, compared to our production. Excuse me, the booked is the sales production, and the lighter color here is the year in goal. And what you'll notice is an interesting relationship that they actually approach parity, meaning they're often very closely tied to each other. Now, we always want to see your booked numbers, your sales production numbers being higher just for the continued growth and health, but there is a relationship, and I just wanted to point that out. So let me get to the crux of why we're here and what methods you've relied on to set production goals for your team. And a month ago, we ran a survey called the Quick Q survey, and it was specifically about this question. And you can see that these are the results. And predominantly, we as an industry are using historical booking trends by manager or by markets. And so you can see where also you're looking at the tentative pipeline, and then only half of you are looking at booking window analysis or really considering what your hotel partners are doing. So I wanted to ask our panelists to chime in here. So Rachel, can you comment on what you've used in the past, in terms of setting production goals for your team?
Yeah, I think the big thing that we've relied heavily on is just such strong history. We have had so many years of great, robust data, and that has been a huge help for us as we look to the future. So each year we could say, really, what are the significant changes that have happened? Did we have a new meeting hotel come online? Are we opening an expansion to our convention center? So that the history was a huge focus. And then also the direction from hotels, because I think for a lot of us, that is really important. So we've had times over the years where our hotels have been less focused on group business, and we need to know that because that's the business that we're in. So there are times when we've made those shifts and those adjustments based on feedback from our hotel community when they've said, hey, we're not as focused on group business. We're focused more on, business traveler, leisure, whatever that might look like. That would then help us figure out what our targets are, because we're the ones that are going to generate the demand, send the leads. But if people don't want the business, then it's going to present a challenge. So I would say those two things have historically been really what we've heavily relied on.
And for larger cities here, it's interesting in the survey results how you've seen this predominantly. It's one of the more significant differences across the CVBs is that the CVBs with facilities greater than 250,000 gross square feet of space, they're looking for that input from hotels. So Doug, can I ask you to chime in on your practices?
Sure. Thank you. It's good to be here. We take a look at history as well. When I got to Louisville 5 years ago, they have a very good research documents and reports to work from. One of those is a market segment pie chart. We do it as a 3-year average. We do it as a 7-year average just to see what's trending. And then that's been very, very helpful in allowing us to, set priorities in the marketing plan, set priorities in the sales plan to how that market segment is trending and shifting, whether it's education, association, sports, corporate, all those major segments that we all track. Great data to look from, and I would double down on your earlier comment, Shimo, is you just can't go wrong keeping the pulse of your hoteliers, your big boxes. In Louisville, we're not we have some leisure. It doesn't compete with other destinations maybe as much in the group market. So, but it's still important for us to reach out and understand their priorities, where are their hot spots, what months, what markets are they giving priority on, because pretty soon it's very likely going to match where you're headed or where you should be headed in terms of your goal setting and the market segments that you're going to give a priority to your destination.
You know, I was thinking something also that, and Darren, you know, Rachel commented on some new supply, and I know that that's, you know, heavy on your radar. I was wondering if you can comment on that and maybe even introduce for us this concept of crossover goals.
Well, you know, when you look at the goals, first of all, you know, I'll say this shift is, we used to say here in LA that we bring a lot of horses to water, but no one's letting them drink. So in the past, generating leads and opportunities was never the problem. It's just when and how much rate was always dictated by what the hotels really wanted. So we really had to be tactical in that approach. And then when you look at crossover goals too, you know, I think what we tried to do is take a 3-year average, very similar to how in the past you get a 3-year history that everyone does. We take the same approach with goals to eliminate anomalies. So like Doug and Rachel pointed out, that there could be things that affect a certain year, but we try to balance that out. And we found that if you take 3 years and that average, it gives us a better idea of what the expectation is and then what we should do as a stretch goal. And then I'll also add to that, while we have a goal that the city requires for us to book, or that we say we're going to book, we always try to put a stretch in there to, I think, push the sellers to see if they can go beyond the expectations and to give us a bit of a safety net, so to speak.
And so are you using, Darren, crossover goals in that way also to help establish your sales production goals?
Yeah. And ask you, what are we crossing over to? What do we have on the books, and what do we need to book in the year for the year?
And you know, I think it's interesting because the use of crossover goals really brings these two concepts together of the year-end goal, right, and your sales production. So you're kind of saying that maybe for 2022, you might need additional room nights in order to catch up to pace or to accomplish, you know, where you want to be with your hotels. And that variance is what you might include in sales production and usually make that a specific goal.
Right.
And Doug, you also, and I know Rachel has too, you know, you've subscribed to doing a destination attractiveness competitive set or a destination attractiveness mathematical metrics model. And you've done that kind of analysis to sort of really hone in on what the year-end goal is. But Doug, do you use that also to help you establish sales production goals?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Once you're comfortable with the DAC or the DAM, what type of year-end goal or consumption benchmark, if you want to use that dated term, when you're comfortable with that and it's accounting for your market's demand generators in a way that you've tested with your hoteliers, you've tested with your own leadership. Yes, once that number is set, I've always worked off, and your slide was very, very emblematic of what I've always worked off of and was taught, is that your booked or produced, your sales production number should be 10 to 15%, depending on the markets, depending on your destination, higher than the year-end goal based on that DAC or DAM analysis. And that way you're, much like the hotels, you're accounting for attrition, you're accounting for slippage, whatever you want to call it. But that's it does, to Darren's point a minute ago, it does put the stretch goal in place, that mentality in place as well. So,
it'll be interesting as we move forward whether those numbers will also be at parity, whether the consumption, the rooms nights that are occurring like in 2020 will be similar to what we're booking. So we'll certainly keep an eye on that. Now, Rachel, you mentioned booking window analysis, and since only 50% of all of our CVBs who answered the survey really, dive into that analysis, I thought it would be good to kind of look at an example. And here is a booking window visual where here I put two kinds of booking window comparisons together. So one of them is this tentative, so the date it goes tentative to arrival, and you could see what's happening, within a 12-month period or 1, 2, 3 years out, or you could look at it with definite to arrival. And I think, Rachel, correct me if I'm wrong, is it the most common thing is to look at definite to arrival?
Yes. Yep. That's how we've always really looked at this. But the tentative is an interesting analysis as well.
And I think what, Rachel, so what you're doing is you're looking at the definite to arrival patterns, and then you're saying how is it that going to change this year? How are we going to either improve, or how is it going to be less? Is that how you're using it to set what your goals are?
For this new world that we're in, yes, that's exactly what we're doing. So we looked and we sort of we used that historical, of course, we used like a 3-year average, and we said how much business, like the percentage, what was happening in the year, for the year, 1 year out, 2 years out. And then I think we go to like 7 and beyond. And then we broke it up center versus non-center, because I think that the curious thing right now with all of our mandates is that the center business is the toughest. That larger business is the stuff that's really being impacted even more so than our small hotel meeting business. So we looked at those percentages, and then we literally said, how do we see this changing for 2021? And really created goals for the year based on those metrics.
I think it is going to be kind of interesting. The thing that I wanted to add about looking at it from a tentative to arrival is that, the phone hasn't rang yet, right? So it'd be interesting for you to track in your own destinations what you could typically count on, so that you can contrast that to reality. And that's just kind of part of the conversation we encourage you to have with your hotel community, is to give them those contrasts so that they understand how you're evaluating the team's progress going forward. So I think that's a great segue, Rachel, to talk about what we're doing differently, right? So in the survey, we asked, okay, now what? Now that we're in the middle of a pandemic, what are you doing differently to set sales production goals, or what are you thinking? So we had 3 categories. So category A, CVBs had made some comments that they're not quite, sure. They're kind of in a wait and see mode, but they're attempting to project recovery quarter by quarter. In the less than 250,000 gross square feet of exhibit space cities, you can see that some of the comments from those cities were about deeper analysis, trying to look at their data in different ways, and setting trying to take more information about, I think someone mentioned about reopening and trying to factor that in. And we touched on analyzing what the hotel partners are doing. And then in the third category, with larger facilities, I think that some of the comments were really speaking more to, well, maybe we need to set different goals. Maybe we need to shift to team goals. And maybe we need to even do more analysis by aggregating all the different types of data that we have available to us. So, Doug, can I go to you and ask you, how you're thinking about things differently with your sales team?
Well, we've heard the term sales is a contact sport, and no longer can the mindset of our sales managers, I'm sure many out there, can they be passive? They have to reach out with good data, informed data that's driving that touch base. They have to get into their account base, and no longer are we all relying on a steady diet of CVent leads or a steady diet of what was once a gravy train. Those days are not here, and when they come back, they'll come back differently. But many of us have been doing this for a while, and the phone was the course, and picking up that phone, sending a well-informed, targeted email with very, very valuable information that is important to that customer. Those are some of the behaviors that we're driving. We're very, very, and I'll put a little bit of a plug in because I am excited that Mint has a chance to be the tool that we all have desperately wanted that to be with the Simple View acquisition of it. I know that there's a tool coming down the line that we're very familiar with called Event Scoring Profile. That's going to change behavior. It should change behavior if you use it the right way, to where you can get into a proactive mode and have groups and specific meetings within a group scored, so that you're chasing business that you already know is going to meet the profile and meet the appetite of your hotel community, whether it's because of where it meets in the time of year, what kind of ancillary spend it might have attached to it. All those factors get wrapped up in this ESP process, and I'm for one very, very excited about how, as an industry, it will impact and change all of our behaviors and how we chase business. I believe it'll be a game changer.
Thanks, Doug. Rachel, do you have anything to add on how you're shifting and aggregating a lot of available data?
I think a lot of what Doug said, I think, is happening at our destination too. And I think it comes down to really looking at qualitative goals a little bit differently. We've always had a little bit of that, but the rubber really hit the road with 3 big metrics: your definites, your leads, and your lead room nights. And as salespeople right now, those goals, they're just not achievable. So we really took a step back and created more of those, like we call them, like strategic contact type of goals. So to Doug's point, like, how are you reaching out to the clients? Because that's really what it's about right now. It's really to no fault of our sales teams if they can't close business right now. So, but because they're salespeople, they're really goal oriented. So it was important for us to be able to shift a little bit and give them some interim goals, if you will, that weren't necessarily tied to incentives. And we'll talk about that later. And I think I see that in 2021, really having to look at more of those qualitative goals, because honestly, from our perspective, we're really looking at 21. We think it's going to look a lot like 2020. We really do. And as much as no, we don't want to hear that, nobody really wants to hear that, we really do think that. And it's because there's just so much uncertainty. And the one thing our clients need is a runway to plan. And it's the one thing we can't provide. So we're really looking at 2021 differently. And it opens up doors because a lot of us have discussed, I mean, Shima, we've talked for years, is room nights the best way to really judge our production? And is it an attendee model? Is it a number of events that you booked in your market type of model? What does that look like? And quite honestly, now's the time to experiment.
And you know what, Rachel, I wholeheartedly agree that now is the time to introduce these other metrics. Now, Darren, you have gone through quite a process, you know, with your team, and I want to show this slide that you shared with me about, you know, the ways in which you were have been shifting. So I thought this was super interesting.
Well, you know, this was developed by, you know, our leadership team here at LA Tourism Convention Board. And we just looked and we listened to the managers on how behavior had shifted. And similar to what Rachel just mentioned, if you see how we were working then to the left and then how we're working now to the right. So you can see account management is almost doubled, because right now, spending time really focused on retaining and rebooking current business and also new account outreach. And what I'll say is, since our staffs have been reduced, they've got additional territory. And once again, to Rachel's point is, we want to look at, are you establishing the contact? Do you know your new accounts? And we can measure that, we can judge that, because they don't know these new accounts because they've got to take on more. And then if you look at proactive sales, that's really been the big shift in terms of prospecting. So when you look at prospecting, you look at face-to-face, you look at sites, that's been drastically reduced, because I don't think the customers are in a position right now to talk about future meetings. They're trying to stay solvent, they're trying to reorganize, and we need to be sensitive to that. And then I think the other point that we saw, it's more important now, because very similar to a lot of our meeting planners and associations, the same is held true with our hotels. The hotels have cut back their sales staffs. So they look to us even more for support, for sales, for guidance. So our outreach, our collaboration, our interaction with our hoteliers is more important than ever, because we have to be their eyes and ears in terms of what's out there, what's going on, and what are the trends. But when you look at, and going back to Doug's statement, you know, I think it's assumptive. Right now, the big difference with LA or say California compared to Denver or we can't take meetings over 10. So I don't know how I would even come close to setting a production goal when I don't know when I'm going to open and what size I'm going to open. And then I would be interested to say, even if they come in, groups are booking, the groups that are rebooking are maybe booking a third or half of what they contract. So how do you set a goal or a 3-year history when you have no idea of not only what you can take with space limitations, but what groups are going to come in with? So I'd rather shift to, like I said, more of a qualitative analysis in terms of what are the sales activities that we're doing to maintain and prepare for when we can take meetings.
You know, I think, Darren, I want to thank you for, you know, sharing this chart with us. I think it's very useful, and I think it's a great communication tool that you use, right, with your hotels and how you're communicating goals. So, Terry, I just want to take a break for now and go to Terry and see whether there are any questions that we could ask our panelists that have come in from the audience.
Well, I have been having engaging discussions with our friend John Cycle in the great city of Fort Worth. So,
hi, John.
Yeah, let me unmute John, because he's had several comments and engaging conversation. Let me see if I can get him unmuted. Okay, John, you're self-muted. So if you could unmute yourself, I think you can talk to us.
We would expect John to have a few comments.
Yeah, right? There he is. Hey, John.
Hello, hello. Well, isn't this an interesting experience today?
I'm glad that we could be part of your day, John.
Yeah, I've been struggling and scratching my head. I think I got a bald spot on top. because I've been looking at the, the quantitative aspect of all of this. So I really appreciate what Darren has done from this sales behavior standpoint. But in the last year, we tried to take a more analytical approach to our business in understanding from Smith Travel what was group, what was transient, understanding our historical accomplishments, and trying to integrate then in, hotel thought processes, which was mentioned earlier. But I just, what I'm struggling with is, that whole historical element that we just talked about that just goes out the window. And, and I empathize with Darren in LA because, at least here in Fort Worth, we are open. We hosted a 2,000 person group in August. We have some other stuff that's coming in, self-contained in the hotels. We have the NFR coming to Fort Worth from Vegas. Unfortunately, that they had guidelines there that were prohibitive. But is it a 30%? Is it a 50%? Is it a 70% difference of my historical data? That's what I'm struggling with. I have all the tools available to analyze it, but I don't know, and I made the comment earlier to Terry, I don't know, I don't have a good enough sense of what the customer confidence is to re-engage and when.
And I'm in my conversations with many customers, they're struggling with the same, I think. And the impact that hybrid would have on our numbers is, I think, going to be very interesting through 2021. And Rachel's comments about the fact that it's going to be impacted greatly is, I think, very, very true. So one practice that I think is important for all of us is that our room blocks need to always reflect the most accurate picture we have as of today. Meaning, if you are getting a sense from the customers that they are going to go hybrid for 2021, and then start to work with them on percentages, because that room block then needs to get adjusted downward. And so it's not going to be a one-time adjustment either. I think that it's going to just continually need to be adjusted. And I think some of the comments we've received about how CVBs are shifting is that it's going to be a quarter by quarter adjustment, because as more information that you take in, you're going to need to, react to that. So the practice, I guess, with all of our panelists is that setting it at the beginning of the year and leaving it is no longer going to be the practice going forward for us. Wouldn't you agree?
Shima, I just want to add in that, we're looking at the number of events.
And I think that,
the number of attendees, the number of room nights is such a moving target. We might want to look at events. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that segmenting those events by size, so that you can start to see, at least from what you've known as a peak room utilization, just always trying to gauge what bucket they sort of fall in is a good practice. Because one thing that you're always going to need to keep your hotels in tow is being able to communicate with them about what's changed. So Terry, so John, thank you so much. I'm not sure we've made you feel comfortable as an answer.
Well,
but,
yeah, because what you just said, makes me take pause, because you look at that lead level of activity, and it's it's woeful. And
amongst other adjectives, yes.
Yeah, I was trying to be politically correct, but yeah, it just doesn't lead you to believe that you've got a foundation even to work on. And again, I commented to Terry, I think that it's so much of a transition for us in our industry. And I think, again, Darren's sales behavior indicates this. We're transitioning from a reactive sales process to a solid proactive. We've got to understand what market segments and what size of groups our hotels are looking for and try to, be that supplemental influx for them.
Shimo, to jump in here too, I think, John, you've made some really good points, and it is really a best guess situation when you're talking pure room nights right now as you look to the future. But I think the one thing that takes a little bit of that pressure off is, I think the reason we stress about that, for one reason, is because of the bonuses that we've historically paid, right? So we've always thought through from a standpoint of, we're going to be paying, and I'm not politically correct, a shit ton of money to someone. So those numbers were super, super important. Well, the reality is we're not going to pay a shit ton of money to people in 21. So that takes the pressure off from the standpoint of, I need people to continue to be goal focused, and we need to figure out what does that incentive look like. But I'll speak for us only that our incentive for 2021, I can tell you already, will not look anything like it did for year end 19. It just won't. I mean, you don't take the type of budget cuts we've taken, and we're not going to bounce back in a year. So in some ways, that takes a little bit of that pressure off, because there's a different justification for the goals that you're creating versus paying out cash to people.
Well, in our instance, based on budget woes, those incentives are gone.
Right.
Totally.
I think creativity comes in, because I think we're all in the travel business, right? And a lot of our people in a lot of our bureaus, while they've gone through furloughs and pay cuts, I know a lot of us have allowed people to use their vacation to supplement and to keep themselves whole if they're able to, if they have that opportunity. So even one of the things we've talked about is create incentives around vacation time, because now we have a lot of people that really don't have vacation left because they've used it to sort of get by. So are there creative ways that we can come up with? And yes, vacation does cost our organizations money, but it's very different, and it goes back to us encouraging people to do what we need the world to do, which is start meeting and traveling and getting out and about again.
Rachel, I want to add, and one of the things around incentives that made me so proud of our team is, first of all, they said we'd feel almost guilty. What we'd rather do is see what we can do to either come back full time, to reestablish our base salaries, and to bring other people back before we would even want an incentive. We want to build the team back. And I can't tell you how it really hit me how concerned they were about the organization and about their peers to say that. We didn't ask them to, but they voluntarily said that we'd rather see our organization rebound before we even talk about incentives. So really, really proud of our team here.
Yeah,
I would add this as well to Rachel's point about taking the pressure off. We've similar conversations. We will, it hurts not to have the incentives in place, but until our staff level comes back, stabilizes, and until all of us get back to where our base salaries were, where you plug into the organization, you're at a different percentage decrease. When those decreases come back to being whole, then we'll be considering, what does the future of incentives look like? But we've tried to do other things, to keep, time off is a nice incentive if you meet a team goal of some sort. There can be some non-financial type incentives that have wonderful impact on the staff and keep them motivated.
Well, I'm sorry, Shimo. Let me see if I can get Eric in St. Louis unmuted. Okay, Eric, I'm coming for you. Hey, Eric, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. How you doing? Great discussions. Good seeing you, skinny guy. Coming from the hotel side, I guess hoteliers were always skeptical of how bureaus incentivize their staffs to begin with, because they were very general in nature on activity, as well as numbers that were not based on real numbers from hotels, because Mint hadn't always been accurate. So going to that point is, we're not paying an incentive plan right now, and we have a reduced staff, probably as many of you do. I was surprised by the ratios on the screenshot, but we look at it as we have two metrics of measuring a person, and that's their annual goals, and then the second is the incentive plan. The incentive plan is all based on numbers, on conversions. The goals are based on things to get you to those numbers, which are activities and behavioral aspects of what are your duties to do your job. So that's how we separate it, and it mirrors a little how hotels look at it. The other aspect to it is, I wanted to ask the panel, how are you handling the COVID cancellation rebooks? Because you're taking numbers out that someone has been incentivized for, and now you're putting it back in for an additional year. So that was a question.
Good question. Rachel, do you want to start us off on that?
Yeah, and Eric, we're glad you're a recovering hotelier, so welcome to this side. And we would be happy to have this types of incentives in place that hotels do if someone will give us the ability to negotiate those contracts. So we don't control shit, so we have to influence everything. So I think that's a big reason why there's those discrepancies. But for us with the rebooks, it's really interesting, because I will tell you, this is probably the one time where we have thought the most like a hotel. So in Denver, we're tracking all of them. We are not taking credit for any of them. So even if it's a group that canceled, we just had our first cancellation was in March, and they're looking to rebook us for 2026. No one will get credit for that. We've had rebookings out as far as 28, and we're tracking it, but we are not doing any type of credit towards that. And the way we level that playing field is, in the hotel world, they take the hit and then they get the new booking. We decided, so they get both, right? Take the hit, get the new booking. We do nothing. So we don't take the hit, but we also don't get the new booking. So that's how we've leveled that in Denver.
Yeah.
Aaron?
I was also going to talk a little bit about the rebooking too. And, if you can save a piece of business into a future year or future date because you're not open, what is the real value of that? And I would like to say that I think people underestimate how much it takes to actually rebook another group, because a lot of these associations especially are booked into other cities. So it's become like a chess game to say, we don't want to, the only way we can bypass cancellation or attrition is to book another year. And that's with the center and a lot of our hotels. But they've got to play this chess game in order to do that. And then we've got to make sure that all the hotels have the availability, all the spaces at the center, and it is extremely time consuming. And I'll knock on wood, but in LA, we've had almost an 80% rebooking rate for groups that need to push the can down the road that were coming in 21. But we need to continue to recognize how much effort that takes. And I would almost say, with new business almost drying up for now, rebooking business has probably been one of our priorities and where we spend the most time.
Well, I think that's excellent question, Eric. So thank you very, very much for bringing that forward. Terry, do we have any other questions?
There's a couple of questions that kind of Michelle Donahue, and then
oh, you're calling them out. So yeah.
And then Ruth Fitzgerald. No, kind of has similar questions about the ability to gauge or monitor these more subjective booking practices, right? The activities. And Darren, since that was your slide, I was wondering if you might comment on what kind of metrics you're using to measure those other sales behaviors that aren't so quantifiable.
Right. When we look at it, we say, okay, so say I'll give a good example. I've had my Midwest City guy have to take over the West Coast. So we'll have a certain amount of accounts that were on the West Coast. So has he done the soft introduction? Does he have updates from those companies or associations on how their staff looks moving forward? There's a lot you can do right now to, I think, engage and connect with the customers without having to hard sell them. And I think the more compassionate you are, the more they'll be willing to say, well, we've had to lay off these many people, but this is what we're looking for. Let's stay in touch. So when we pull up the data, it's all about the metrics on account management. And we can basically try to measure how many new accounts have they established? Have they made that contact? Are they updated in Simple View? So there are a lot of ways that you can make a qualitative activity, also quantitative, and goal around that.
Absolutely.
So in other words, all those qualitative goals can be quantitative in nature.
Mhm.
Exactly.
So you have this was just one part of the survey that we've been kind of talking around, which is the question of do you currently have a active incentive program? And the majority of CVBs have said no to this question. And then I've broken it out by the different categories of CVBs here. And I think that whether or not these incentive programs are in place or not, I think that the underlying thing is that goals are very important to have, and I'm hearing that from our panelists.
Absolutely.
So I want to have a conversation with our panelists with the few minutes we have left. And when we talked and prepared for this webinar, I took some notes as to 4 takeaways. So one of them was about being in sync with your hoteliers and making sure we understand how they're setting their own goals or what they're budgeting or forecasting. So surveying them, interviewing them is a very important input into goal setting. Be driven by all the data you have available, including both the year-end goal information as well as sales production goals for your stakeholder conversation. So we have a lot of data that's being published and available to us, but taking in all of that and then being able to share with your stakeholders your thought process is a key takeaway. Understanding market segment trends and strengths for your particular destination, we talked about that. And what we just ended is that your salespeople, it's very important to have specific goals, especially and encouraging us to think about, and as Rachel says, getting creative on additional metrics by which we can make sure our teams are focused on what matters most. So I want to turn this over to the panelists. Is there anything that I might have missed, or from your perspective, that you would like to leave the audience with today?
I think
I'll go. Go ahead. Go ahead, Rachel.
Oh, sorry. It was the point you made earlier, which is, I think the MO for us for 2021 is not static goals. These are going to be fluid. And I think that our F word for 2021 is flexibility. And it really is looking at doing things a little bit differently. And it's a good time to try things. I mean, like all of us, we have a city contract that sort of has our goal metrics outlined in it, but there's no better time to try to blow up a system that perhaps already wasn't totally working as well as it could have than right now.
Doug.
Yeah. Just listening to Eric's point about hoteliers and their thought of how bureaus have always approached the numbers they show, the numbers they report. Now's the time to get close to that community than we ever have before. We're working hard to showcase on Future Pace an accurate portrayal of what we know from and getting as far out in front of it as data will allow us to get. And when we don't have the data, we're still making some adjustments on certain groups, depending on trade, business, commercial, whatever market segment it might be, just so that we're showing from a destination standpoint the absolutely best information they can be working off of, as many of them right now are, planning for 21 and forecasting and doing their marketing plans. So now is the best time. Never before has it been more important for us to work together and keep that line of communication open.
And Doug, thank you very, very much for the plug on Future Pace. It is a passion project for us about, really bringing your data to be more accessible to you, so that you have better insights about your activities and how you're pacing towards future targets. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
So Jared, anything you want to leave the audience with today?
Yeah, first of all, a nice plug for Future Pace. This wasn't the goal of the call, but hey, I know you can't help yourself, Shimo.
I'm always a salesperson.
Rachel, I want to say, if I have to hear the word fluid again, I'm going to jump off of a cliff, because I don't want to ever hear that word again. I've heard it too much.
I didn't say it. I said fluid.
Fluid. I know fluid is, yeah. But anyway, I think it's all about being prepared. So when that go button or the green light or the flag goes, we're ready to go. So we want to make sure that we have everything in place. That's listening to our hoteliers in terms of what they need, when they need it, and how we're going to go about it. And then I think the other thing is really analyzing the vertical sectors that are quickest to recover. So whether we're looking at technology, consumer products, we're looking at medical, we're looking at sports now. And I think our hotels in LA might not have considered, say, something like an esports. Well, now they might. But I think it's listening to how they're rethinking the business model, being sensitive to that, pairing that with what we know in terms of the first markets to recover. So once again, when that green light goes, we're ready to go full on. So we're just waiting. We're still at red. We're not even at yellow.
Well, I think that these are all great comments. I hope our audience felt like they've gotten some takeaways and some ideas and things to think about and bring back to their own teams. So Terry, can I ask you just to help us end with some housekeeping announcements?
Absolutely. So everyone will get a copy of the recording and a PowerPoint deck, Nicole, simply tomorrow. So if not, if you don't see it in your, it will come from Simple View Marketing. If you don't see it in your inbox, you might check your spam, but as always, you can reach out to me. We'll be happy to get it to you if it doesn't find its way. And just great engagement with our audience. It was great to have so many nice conversations with everyone. I know, Rachel, with regard to your F word for 2020, Julie Fitzpatrick in Northern Kentucky was just really asking, and I thought this might be a nice question to end on, was asking about potentially the use of EEI and, kind of stepping out perhaps and using a completely different mechanism.
Is that one for me?
Anybody jump in there. She was just saying, are any of you really thinking about using EEI goals instead of room night goals? If they're thinking about it in Northern Kentucky, since they're kind of moving more into community value concept, and they use the EEI calculator.
Yeah, I think that we love the economic impact calculator. I think the tough part is, what metrics are you putting in there? And that's where we're struggling. Like, so if a group was typically 6,000 people, what does that look like? So I think it kind of still goes back to that, still using a foundation of numbers, and those are the very numbers that were the most worried and that are the most uncertain. So if you do it from a post meeting perspective, I think that is helpful, but I think that's the struggle we're continuing to have as we look forward, is how do we project these groups right now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think that the how is really what's going to take us into more conversations about this. So I want to thank everyone for participating in the quick queue that provided us some thoughts going into this webinar. And if you have a suggestion for a question you would like to ask of your colleagues, you can send it our way, and we'll facilitate an additional conversation in the future. So thank you, panelists. And we hope you have a great day.
Thank you, Sheba.
Bye-bye, everybody. Good luck.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
What's the business?